Dear Mother, if I never set foot in the sanctum again, it will be too soon. Everything aches. My feet are tired from walking aimlessly through a maze. My muscles sore from wielding my sword and shield. Even my bones ache, down to the marrow itself, trudging about in this wretched armor. I feel as if I've used every ounce of mental aptitude I possess. Glitterbug was right. The sanctum is a testing grounds, and I believe it's been my patience that has been most heavily assessed. We allowed ourselves a short break after our experience with the spiders and wolves. Sarai seems out of sorts. Several times I've seen her hold Craggy up to her ear, only to pull it away and look at it with stifled contempt. Sarai asked Victor about his knives singing to him in discordant harmony. Seems the choir may not all fancy the same melody. I asked Victor about his knives returning to him in battle. He explained that he becomes bonded to the blade as he spends time with it. It becomes part of the dance of battle. It's almost as if the knife is an extension of him, and he an extension of the knife. They are one. Finally, it was time to embark on the next leg of our test. We each stepped through the purple-shrouded archway and found ourselves in a labyrinth made entirely of purple crystals. We were surrounded by rock on every side, as if we were actually inside a geode ourselves. The archway behind us quickly closed as crystals grew where it once was. There we were, once again trapped, with nowhere to go but forward. When at last the archway was gone, it was dark as night. All of us can see fairly well in the dark, with the exception of Bolt. They extended the chain in their arm, and Victor led them through the labyrinth. There was an eerie silence in the maze. Our footsteps echoed loudly down each hall as we struggled to find our way. We had to double back several times. The hallways were narrow, and we were constantly bumping into one another and stepping on toes. We didn't really need to walk so closely, but to say we were apprehensive about our straits would be an understatement. We were waiting for someone or something to jump out at us around every bend. In hindsight, I'm sure we looked like a pack of timid mice on the hunt for a bit of cheese, the savage glitterbug like a tabby watching us silently from her invisible perch, the occasional twitch of her tail the only tell of her consciousness. We eventually found ourselves in a room. The walls were adorned with simple sconces sporting purple lights. These walls, like the walls of the labyrinth, were made up entirely of lavender crystal. The shape and size of these crystals created a strange reflection, like seeing one's visage in a pond, but instead of viewing a perfect likeness, I was greeted by a distorted twin. In the center of the room was a single pedestal. Embedded in the column were 5 crystals stacked one above the other. Displayed on top of the pedestal was a rectangular-shaped box with no lid. We approached the box apprehensively. The box contained a tiny replica of the maze itself, a living blueprint of sorts. In the center, we found a tiny glitterbug figurine, like a doll in her sinister dollhouse. The figure was in a room identical to the one we stood in. Beyond the pedestal and the box were 3 doorways. The doorways were made of different types of gems, but where an opening to another room would normally be, there was a solid gem wall. The first doorway was made of rubies, and had writing above it in Infernal. The second was made of sapphires, above which was written, "Safe" in Celestial. The third was made of topaz, and had the word "Unsafe" written in Common. Unfortunately, none of us can read Infernal. As we started dissecting our predicament, the gems on the side of the pedestal began to light up, one by one, like some sort of countdown. This put us all in panic mode. Sarai shrunk Craggy down and put it next to the glitterbug figurine in the box. It simply vanished, then reappeared next to her. She then tried to walk through the sapphire doorway, which said "Safe" above it, hoping there was a hidden entrance, but there was no way through. Ezra was certain the model with the miniature glitterbug had a purpose in the puzzle. He picked up the little figurine and slammed it into the model's sapphire doorway. There was a bright flash and the whole room seemed to shift beneath our feet. The safe sapphire doorway was clearly not an option. With the time ticking away, Victor grabbed the glitterbug figurine and moved it to the ruby doorway in the model. Again, there was a bright flash of light and the entire room moved. It seemed the only option left was the topaz door, the one labeled unsafe. Bolt took up the glitterbug figurine and pushed her through the topaz door. As they did so, we were all magically transported into another room. This came as a huge relief. I did not want to know what happened if our time limit expired. The second room was almost identical to the one we had just been in. So began our puzzle-solving journey. After several rooms with gem-covered doorways labeled with cryptic messages, we entered a long, winding hallway. At the end of the hallway was a huge round room. The ceiling was 100 feet tall and was adorned with sharp crystals pointing downward. Not the kind of room you'd want to be in during an earthquake. On the perimeter of the room were 7 stone pedestals that were stuck in a circular groove in the floor. Atop 5 of the pedestals were stone statues. 1 pedestal contained a box, and the remaining pedestal was empty. Our eyes took in the scene before us. Another puzzle, no doubt. Suddenly, we spied a body across the room in a heap on the floor. I rushed over and knelt beside the body and found a gnome who is, without a doubt, Ainur Elevir. She was alive but unconscious. I moved to wake her, and Ezra started to panic. Ainur is from Willow Creek Hollow, as is Ezra. If she recognizes him, she could reveal his identity to the Arcanum. I mentioned in a previous letter that Ezra's father gave him a book, and the Arcanum have been hunting him down ever since. I revealed to Ezra that I know this book contains highly classified magic, which I can only assume is time magic. I've been instructed by Lucan, my employer, to find the book and to keep it safe from the Arcanum. We cannot let Ezra's book fall into the wrong hands. It didn't feel right to not at least try waking Ainur. Ezra agreed to hide behind Bolt as I gently put my hands on her. She wouldn't wake up. I tried to provide her some healing, but she must have been through something horrible, and her body had put itself in some sort of protective sleep. We wouldn't be able to do anything for her unless we could get out of the sanctum by completing Glitterbug's tests. Victor found a cloak, a tricorn hat, and a porcelain mask with red stripes down the cheeks in the box on one of the pedestals. As Victor studied the statues, he realized each one was a character from the story of the Weeping Swordsman. It took us a bit of time to devise a plan, and after being in the room for 10 minutes, everything began to shake. We heard a loud crack, and the ceiling above, the one with the dagger-like crystals hanging from it, dropped 10 feet. I could almost feel Glitterbug's amusement as we launched into hysteria. Before long, Victor was acting out the entire story of the Weeping Swordsman, playing the role of the title character himself. I've never heard the story. It was really quite heartbreaking. The story tells of a swordsman named Dallin, who had fallen in love with a noblewoman, Melina. Melina had been promised to another, but her father told Dallin that if he could prove himself, he could have Melina's hand in marriage. The swordsman bested every opponent sent his way, and it seemed, against all odds, a commoner would be allowed to marry a noble. But the tale ended in sorrow, as Dallin was framed for the murder of his beloved. He tried to prove his innocence to the Arcanum, but they didn't believe him. He was able to escape the Arcanum's clutches and ran into the night. It is said that Dallin now roams Terabon, seeking to right wrongs by killing his foes. He leaves his victims with 2 cuts on their cheeks, where the blood spills down their faces like grotesque red tears. I can't imagine the story is true, but if it is, I'll keep a careful watch if I ever find myself there again. About halfway through the puzzle, Victor discovered a dagger with an onyx gemstone inlaid in the hilt. According to Victor, this knife belongs with the 6th wing. I have much to learn about this group Victor belongs to. Most of the blades Victor uses have been given to him as gifts. His favored knife, which he calls Shadow Song, was forged by his father. I know Victor's mother is the leader of the 4th ring. I wonder where his father falls in the hierarchy of leadership. Victor finally ended the story of the Weeping Swordsman by killing one of the statues. As he did, another doorway opened in the circular room. Hopefully, a way out. Bolt picked up Ainur and carefully wrapped her in a cloak, then strapped her to their chest. We made our way into the next room. A large treasure chest sat in the middle of it, and Victor moved straight forward to open and examine its contents. As he approached, the chest began heaving. The lid shot open to reveal 2 rows of razor-sharp teeth. 6 terrible eyes blinked open just above the cruel mouth, which was dripping with saliva. The tongue of this creature whipped out and lashed itself around Victor's arm. Ezra quickly shot orange magic from his hands to stop the monster. Bolt tried to whip it with its chain, but I think having the gnome strapped to its chest made for a bit of an impediment, and they missed. I ran forward with my longsword and freed Victor by cutting the beast's tongue from its mouth. Seredan finished it off with the butt of her spear. It felt amazing to make such quick work of our enemy. We were rewarded 200 silver pieces for killing the monster, as well as a small stone pillar with a flower etched on its side. All this found within the belly of the beast. Another archway appeared, and we found ourselves once again in the courtyard of the sanctum with Glitterbug. She seemed both thrilled and perhaps a bit surprised to watch us best her second series of tests. We each took a moment to gather our thoughts before moving on to the final test. Finally, we could no longer prolong the inevitable, and we stood before the final archway. Bolt hung Einor's body in a tree, and I left her with my snuggle beast for comfort, and to help her body heal. There was no way we were going to risk her life by taking her with us through the third archway. Glitterbug told us there was an aboleth beyond the orange barrier. Victor and Ezra described an aboleth as a large fish. I thought to myself, I've eaten plenty of fish. How bad could it be? I had no idea what we were about to face. We all cautiously walked through the orange barrier. We entered the burned forest, and I was filled with a sense of dread and hopelessness. Behind us, the archway vanished in a cloud of smoke. Mother, I consider myself quite brave. This past year, I've had to prove my courage on a daily basis, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't afraid in that moment. We walked in silence down a dark path. The trees all around us were bare and black. The ground was covered in ash. I was cautiously looking through the trees, trying to spy this great big fish Glitterbug had warned us about. I took a step forward, and I thought I had stepped onto a patch of moss, like the lichen that grow around the base of the trees in the forest at home. I looked down, expecting to find little mushrooms sprouting from the damp earth. But instead of green plant life, the ground was a sickly-looking purple and fleshy. The wine-colored earth spread out for nearly 80 feet from where we stood. In the center of the tissue-like ground was a mound. Seredan, forever the reckless hero, moved closer to the mound. When she was almost close enough to touch it, huge tentacles unfurled from the center. This wasn't the aboleth we were expecting, but equally as terrifying. Ezra tried to attack the beast with his orange magic, but it was swiftly absorbed into the monster's flesh, which soon started pulsing. It was rhythmic and haunting. The flesh continued to throb when suddenly, from within the mass, several insect-looking creatures emerged. They were the size of a fox and had claws with sharp pincers, like a cross between a cicada and a wheelbug. They were the most menacing-looking beasts I've ever seen. Several more encircled us after crawling out of the tree line. We were in trouble. What ensued was complete pandemonium. Victor began his hypnotic dancing and started throwing out knives, gnaw, clinch, and shadow song, every which way, then called them back to him, slicing through the bug-like creatures. Seredan was then quickly attacked by the arthropod enemies. Bolt put their new gauntlets to good use and began smashing away at everything in sight, but was having a difficult time making any of their punches cause meaningful damage. Ezra shocked us all as he began using time magic. I'm always delighted to see any kind of magic in use, having been so removed from it all of my life. But chronergy is truly something else. With the flick of Ezra's wrist, a line of shadowy Bolt silhouettes flanked Bolt on either side. Each counterpart glowed orange as Ezra determined which timeline he favored most. He decided upon a more agreeable outcome, and time truly stood still as that version of Bolt executed a perfect attack on the purple flesh beneath our feet. I won't pretend to understand what I saw, but I know it wasn't just my imagination. This power Ezra possesses is truly mighty. It is little wonder the Arcanum is so fixed on finding Ezra's book. Seeing chronergy magic firsthand makes me even more determined to protect Ezra and his power from getting into the wrong hands. It seemed we were making some decent headway, disposing of several of the large insects and slicing off a tentacle or two, but our luck was quickly running out. Before long, Seredan had been knocked unconscious and grappled by a large tentacle. Victor was completely surrounded and then overrun by the wee beasties. Like the heads of the mythical Hydra, as we cut off one tentacle, another would appear in its place. Even Bolt, the bulkiest and most resilient of us all, was hurting. Ezra had a potion of healing on hand, which he drank to boost his strength. Bolt tended to Victor and I to Seredan. As Seredan came to, while still entangled in the creature's tentacle, she managed to slice through the massive mound with her glaive, killing it on the spot. Our work was not done, however. We still had the little pests to deal with, but with the death of their mother, the babies began acting strangely. Some turned on one another, others ran away, making our job much easier. Ezra threw a magical orange web on 3 of the beasts, entrapping them. Soon we had sliced through the last of them. The purple flesh was still wriggling and twitching, although it was clearly dead, like the chickens we slaughter for food. Exhausted, we approached the mound. Below the outer flesh, we could see a hoard of treasure within the monster. Ezra cut away at the flesh with his magic. We found a pile of money and gems and several potions. We also discovered a glowing ember core. We can only assume this was once Embarrass, the fire elemental that lived in this part of the sanctum, which must have been destroyed and absorbed by our violet-tinted foe. At the very bottom of the treasure, we found the most peculiar object. It appeared to be a shard of metal, shaped like a diamond, yet it was glowing with the brilliance of the sun. I have never seen anything like it before. Bolt cautiously picked the object up. It began shaking. We all took a step back, nervous of what new danger might befall us. I saw a combination of fear and astonishment flicker across Bolt's metal face as the object rose out of their hands and swiftly embedded itself in their chest, knocking them completely senseless.